Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and today I have a movie review. It's a surprise one because I got this at like a thrift store and I needed to see what this was about. It's directed by Troy Nixey and it was written by Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins, based on a teleplay by Nigel McKeand. And the movie is called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Now, from what I know from this movie, this is actually a remake of a 1973, I guess, straight to TV classic. I've never seen it before, nor do I really care to after looking at a trailer of it, because it looks fucking awful. But I watched this movie because I looked at the cover and I saw Bailee Madison, who I recognize from this show I watch called The Haunting Hour, and she's also on this Pretty Little Liars reboot that I've low-key watching. Don't judge me out there, but I low-key love Pretty Little Liars. And I was like, I don't remember this movie ever coming out. It came out in 2010. It stars Guy Pearce and Katie Holmes. And I was like, well, let me see what this movie is about. Guillermo del Toro, I don't really watch much of his stuff. I do try to check some stuff out here and there that he puts out, but I just, it's not a creator I need to check. But why I wanted to try this was because it looked like a textbook Cobweb or The Boogeyman or, I don't know, some other movies out there, The Babadook. It kind of looks like a movie that feels like in that vein. And after watching this reminded me of one of my favorite 1980s movies called The Gate. It has a whole lot of similarities there, and in a lot of ways, I kind of consider this more of a remake of The Gate, because as much as I love that, this one was surprisingly good. It is derivative of this, I guess, niche subgenre. It is a rated R version of this type of subgenre, which normally is PG-13. Honestly, trim out a few scenes, this could have been PG-13 for real, but I dare say I enjoyed this movie. So the plot involves this little girl. Her name is Sally, and she has been sent to go, hang out with her father and I guess her soon-to-be or new stepmother. And her father is played by Guy Pearce, and the stepmom is played by Katie Holmes. And they have recently bought a property out in the middle of like this beautiful countryside, and it's this old, beautiful Gothic mansion. However, in the prologue, we get a really chilling scene to kind of, I don't want to get into too much spoilers, but it involves a man down in like this basement of sorts, capturing a woman, busting out her teeth with like a chisel, and leaving these teeth by this vent. And this vent may or may not have something inside coming for this man. Fast forward years later, you're now at the events where Sally and her parents have bought the place. Sally is taking Adderall, and her mother or stepmother has made note of this. And as the plot goes along, you kind of learn the truth about what happened to Sally's mother, and it's really fucked up. But what happens is Sally, she starts to kind of detach herself from her father and her stepmother because she thinks that her stepmother is going to replace her mom and all that. But she finds some solace when they find out that where this basement was in the prologue has been closed off, and they open like this wall up, and they go down there, and they go to the same area that we saw in the prologue, and it's like bolted shut, like really tight. And there's this gardener or caretaker that I think his grandfather was the man in the prologue that we got to see, was given warnings saying that the kids shouldn't be here. It's very dangerous to be down here, and he might be holding on to some secrets. And Sally thinks that she hears whispering coming from this vent thing that was also shown in the prologue, to the point where she gets obsessive and starts to draw pictures of this vent. And she gets this impulse to skip school one day and go down there and like unscrew the bolts and try to, form it out. But she gets caught, and what ends up happening is when she's caught, she tries to go back upstairs, but the vent kind of breaks open itself. And then from this point on in the story, it kind of becomes like a You Gotta Believe Me type story, but in a chilling way, where Sally is being followed by these little tiny creatures that could be considered fays or fairies in the traditional sense of like their old folktale legends, not like the whole romanticized Disney version of what a fairy is. These are pretty much blind. They are afraid to death of light. And what they do is they come through this vent, and what they have to do is pretty much gather teeth to eat them. Yes. And they're after Sally for her teeth. And the stepmom sees these experiences going on with Sally, and the dad thinks that she's just acting out and making up stories to get attention, but she decides to investigate further. And what prompts this is after a point where Sally starts to get stalked really by these really creepy fae creatures, the gardener guy gets attacked by these and like mortally wounded in kind of a violent way and sent to the hospital. And when Sally's stepmom goes there and talks with him, she gets this idea that she's going to have to do some investigation on her own. So she heads off to the library and asks the librarian for public records. And the public record guy just so happened to have a whole archive of these guys' plans, that the guy who made the home. And you get this backstory that the person who designed the home was very much into fairy folk legend and all that, and built the house on the specific part of the land so he can finally meet these creatures of the fae. But soon after he built the home, he realized that there's a whole lot more to the story. Essentially, apparently one person has to die every so often to keep the fae at bay. And if they haven't eaten in a while, they're going to relentlessly come after people and attack them and hurt a lot of people. So you pretty much have to give up a sacrifice. Yeah. And there's also a thing where it can also bring you a lot of fortune. So like if you put a tooth under your pillow, it doesn't even have to be your own tooth. They'll grant you with like a huge silver coin. So I don't know if the guy from the prologue was teeth farming or whatnot to get rich. I couldn't tell you. But that's kind of like an idea that you can get across with the fays, that you can maybe get rich off this as well. So the stepmom starts to realize that maybe there's more to the story, and she goes and looks through Sally's room, and she sees these drawings of the fae creatures that look like the drawings of the fae creatures that were in these documents at the library. And she starts to piece it together that maybe what she's saying is true, and she's not crying wolf, right? And meanwhile, Sally has these very narrow encounters with these fae creatures, and it builds up to a very tense climax of the story where they essentially try to like get her on a rope and pretty much take the rope down to this deep tunnel beneath the home where they live and suck her through the vent. And something tragic happens. Something really fucking morbid happens to a character you're not expecting it to happen to. And then the story ends off on a very fucking weird note. But that's essentially what you're going to expect out of Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. So this movie, going into it blind, I have to say was a very well shot film. The atmosphere to this is pretty much, it's pretty much a one setting type of movie. The entire movie takes place in the home. It's very small. And for a movie that runs for a runtime of, let's see how long this runs for. It felt like a good while. I don't know if it's going to say it. All right, 99 minutes. 99 minutes. So, a little bit above that hour and a half mark. Hour and 40 minute range. For an hour and 40 minute movie, it did kind of drag at some points because of how stale the setting was. But I will say there's plenty of rooms inside of this house that kind of give off this house with a clock in its walls or Monster House type of vibe where, you know, you have all these different rooms to explore. It's kind of like the Haunted Mansion as well. You know, it's definitely a, you know, the setting supersedes itself for the material, right? But I really dug the atmosphere of it, despite some staleness at some points. Like I said, the music was good. The color tones of the movie looked great. The acting performances were actually surprisingly good. Katie Holmes was kind of average for her, you know, acting ability. She's kind of the same thing in every movie. That quirky, awkward, shy girl with the smirks. She's still that character here, but she's fine. Guy Pearce plays a dickhead father who kind of learns the truth and actually gets fucked up a little bit near the climax. And he gets to experience all this, and he has some good character growth. But the star of the show is Bailee Madison. Bailee Madison actually carries the narrative of this movie to the point where I can honestly say that if you're a fan of like R.L. Stein's Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark from the 90s, this feels like a adult version of Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark. For sure, for sure. It fits in that subgenre very neatly. Yeah, she did a great riveting job. I mean, I love all the episodes she's been in Haunting Hour too, which is at the time of this movie releasing 2010, that was a relative new show to come out on the Hub Network. I'm shocked that she did kids horror and adult horror here, because this was fantastic, and I think they all turned in great performances as a whole from the cast. The creature design, now here's the thing, there are some shots where you can tell that they're claymation and some that you can tell that they're completely CGI'd. That kind of threw me off a little bit, and I think that if you're not a fan of like CGI monster films, this might take you out of it. But the way these motherfuckers act, man, they get brutal in this movie, and you don't get a lot of violence in the film. You get some in the beginning in the prologue. It does take a while to get to another scene where they act out, and then the climax, of course, is fucking violent. But the way the story builds up tension with these creatures here, it is kind of creepy, because at first you have no fucking idea what these things are for like the first half of the movie. And then once you realize that they're basically like tooth fairies that actually eat human bone and they need to have a sacrifice made to keep them happy, that shit was wild to me. And that twist at the end, y'all, I did not see that shit fucking coming at all, man. That blew me away. That honestly blew me away. Now the ending itself is kind of corny and cheesy, but yeah, and it's almost borderline irresponsible given the context of what they're planning on doing with the house. But still, nonetheless, very fun, entertaining movie. If I had any flaws with this, I will say that it does kind of drag out the idea. At a 99-minute movie with a stale setting, a lot of this stuff kind of drags. It takes a while to get going after the prologue. It's a lot of setup that plays into a lot of tropes and cliches of, you know, a kid in a divorcee family. You know, been there, fucking done that with that shit. Nothing new here. You have some plot convenience and contrived moments of the story where, especially like the librarian having all this info dump right at a convenient point of the plot, because we've gone through so much of the movie not knowing what the fuck these things are. And then conveniently, the plot just dumps it there for the audience. Did stick out like a sore thumb. And I do find that as a negative for me, because it just felt kind of lazy. And yeah, a lot of this movie feels kind of by the numbers. And, you know, coming from somebody, you know, who owns copies of these movies, like The Boogeyman, Lights Out, The Babadook, this feels very derivative of movies like that, right? They all feel in a similar subgenre. Even Cobweb, to an extent, as well, feels like this, where you have a kid whose parents don't believe him, and then they have these monsters living inside their fucking home. It's no different here. It does nothing new, but except the twist is they're not some like demon or some spider creature. They're actually like fairy creatures that live underneath the home, which is, I guess, cool, and a fun spin. But like I said, this also is a callback to that movie I was telling you about, The Gate. It feels a lot like that. And I kind of wish they played more into the underground a little bit in the movie. That was also a big missed opportunity. Them actually going down into this underworld where these fairies live, I think would have been more harrowing and completely different that you wouldn't expect in like an Alice in Wonderland kind of way, or maybe a Coraline type of way. But they just didn't do it. And it's kind of a shame. But I guess as a remake to a 1973 straight-to-TV movie, I really enjoyed this. Now, I don't know how it stacks up to the original. Like I said, I really don't fucking care to watch the original. But I'd recommend this movie. It's a nice little flick. Not the best thing ever. It's kind of derivative. But I think it is above average. It's a well shot movie. It's well made. So I'd probably give this maybe like a flat 4 out of 5 stars. It was very enjoyable. I'm glad I own this in my collection. And this makes me want to kind of dive into this little subgenre a little bit. I think the next one I'm going to review is going to be Cobweb or something like that. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, take care. Let me know your thoughts on this movie. Did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know.